Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Kaylin. I'm a PhD student in History and African American Studies at Yale University, and I recently completed my MST or my Master of Studies at the University of Oxford in US History. So today I'm going to be giving you my brutally honest review of my time at Oxford. I have kind of hinted at this for a while that my time at Oxford was really challenging, and I'm going to be talking about why. I'm sure you guys have seen the title. I will be talking about the investigation and the challenges that I faced within the institution at the end of the video. But first I want to cover some of the details that you guys have asked for. I've been asked on several occasions to talk about my Oxford experience, but today I'm going to be covering everything. I'm going to be covering coursework, grading, supervision, college, everything. And if you guys have any questions about applying to Oxford, I actually made a video on how I got into Oxford with all the application components, my GPA, my statement of purpose, everything. So if you want to check that out, there's going to be a card above. And if you guys want to catch up on my Oxford vlogs to kind of see what my experience was like, then please go ahead and check out my Oxford Diaries playlist. So we're going to go ahead and get into it because I'm sure this video is going to be very long. And if I miss anything, please go ahead and just leave me a comment down below. I'm happy to answer. And I can also cover things in a separate Q&A video. If there are more questions, then I can answer in the chat. So first we're going to begin with course structure. So I got into the MST in US History, and when I applied, I actually applied for the MPhil and the MST. So the MPhil at Oxford is a 2-year master's degree. It is a quote research degree where you write a slightly longer dissertation. The coursework is relatively similar to the MST. You just have a longer paper component, and that is to prepare you for a DPhil. I did the MST, which is technically a taught course, but I still had a relatively long dissertation at the end. And I will be making a video on how to write a dissertation. If that's something you guys would like to see, please give this video a thumbs up so that way I know that that's something you guys are interested in. So when I applied to the 2-year program as well as the 9-month program, and the 9-month program was the one I was accepted into. So I got to Oxford in late September. I arrived, dropped my things off, went and traveled around the country for a little while, and then I came back. So some people had asked about culture shock. I would say ultimately the culture shock of being in England was not nearly as great as the academic culture shock. The institutional differences at Oxford compared to my undergraduate institution at UCLA was very different, and we'll talk a little bit about why. So I just want to go over like all the little pieces in case this is actually helpful to somebody that is actually going to Oxford. So I actually was a member of Somerville College. I originally applied to be at UNIV, so University College, but I got into Somerville, and I'm really glad that I did because Somerville was an incredible college. The community was just unmatched, and I'm really glad that I ended up there. So when I arrived, I went to the Porter's Lodge, got the key, moved in. The porters were mostly super helpful. If you are an international student and you're considering going to Oxford, or you're heading to Oxford in a couple weeks, and then the way that you have to go about it as an international student is you have to go to the post office in order to get your card, like your visa, and then the rest of your immigration information is with your college. So you're gonna have to go to the academic office at your college. So I moved in, I had a really large room. It was in Marjorie Fry House, and I was right across from somebody who became my best friend. We had a shared bathroom, a shared kitchen, a shared shower room. So the bathroom and shower were shared between 4 girls, and then we all shared a kitchen on our floor. So there was 8 of us. The kitchen in Marjorie Fry was really small, but I saw some other college accommodations where the kitchens were rather large. I did not end up using the kitchen. I pretty much always either ate out or I ate in the hall. I ate in hall almost for every one of my meals, unless I just was bored of it and I wanted to go somewhere else. Okay, so now I'll talk a little bit about Freshers Week. So Freshers Week, I was actually very antisocial. I was really worried about school and really worried about getting ahead of my classes. So I ended up not really attending many of the events. I don't regret it because I did still make friends, but had I not had as active an MCR, or the graduate community wasn't as social, I probably would have had a really hard time making friends. At Somerville College, the MCR is a graduate community, but it is also a lounge, and a lot of people would hang out in there. So I made friends really quickly. I made an incredible friend group, and I will get into them in a little while because they were probably the most important part of my Oxford experience. But now we're gonna get into course structure. So for the MST in US History, we had 2 classes the first term. So Michaelmas term, we had historiography and sources, as well as theory and methods. And then there was a formative essay that you had to write, and then there was a methodology essay due when you returned from winter break, if I remember correctly. I personally was not a fan of the theory and methods course. I'm going to be straight up about it. I had a hard time with the professor that was teaching the class because theory and methods covers a whole span of history, and the people in the class are like a mix of medievalists and Americanists and history of war and like intellectual historians. Normally you'd think that that would be a very good thing because there's a diversity of thought. The problem was that the professor's view on history was very narrow. And so when I went to go talk to him about my formative essay, I said I wanted to write a paper on the institution of slavery through the lens of sexual violence. And he said to me, there's not enough sources there. And I was like, well, I actually disagree. There are plenty of sources. This is my area. Like I know that there's enough sources. And he's like, no, I think that research is too narrow. And I went and talked to my supervisor and I was like, I feel stuck. And she said, well, the formative essay isn't really graded, so just do it anyway. So that's what I did. I didn't end up actually using that paper for any type of graded work, and it ended up being a really great source for me to prepare for my dissertation. So I'm glad that I wrote the paper that I did. I'm glad that I stood up for my subject, because you have to be an advocate for your work. And I say this to my clients all the time. I have an admissions consulting business, and the most important thing about becoming a graduate student is you have to be an advocate for yourself. You have to be an advocate for your work, and that'll definitely come in play later in this story. My sources in historiography class was relatively good. I had a variety of professors that were teaching it. Steve Tufnell and Catherine Paw, Gareth Davies were perhaps my favorite professors. They were so kind. They were incredible instructors. They really led the discussion in a way that allowed other students to really speak. The visiting professor would also join. His name was Peter Mancall. He was visiting from USC. I really loved getting to know him and getting to work with him. I'm really bummed that Corona made it so that I couldn't actually get to know him a little bit better. But overall, the people that were teaching that sources in historiography class were pretty good. I also was in that class with my cohort, and I absolutely loved my cohort. Imogen and Guion and Josh and Mia and Apollo. Everybody in my cohort was just so wonderful. I'm so glad that I got to take classes with them. They were so brilliant. And I felt like we had a really great conversation in class every time, and I am honestly really bummed I didn't get to celebrate with them when we finished our degrees, but I'm so grateful that I got to meet them and got to work with them. So that's the course structure for Michaelmas term. So then Hillary term, which is the winter term, we had an option course. So this is one where you can kind of select which class you want to take. And I ended up taking the North American Women's History class with my advisor, Dr. Catherine Paw, and it was wonderful. She is an American historian, and she studies enslaved women and medicine in Barbados as well as in early America, and so her interests align very well with mine, which is why I chose to work with her. And the class was incredible. I have to say, I was so impressed with the other students that took that class. I took that class with a lot of the people that were in my cohort as well, and they were just so brilliant, and that class was my favorite by far. So the final paper that I ended up writing for that option course was a comparative history of interracial sex and enslaved women in Virginia versus enslaved and free Black women in French Louisiana. I really liked writing that paper. It was really interesting. It was an area of history that I hadn't really gotten to dive into yet, and I'm glad that I had the room to do that. Then the final term, which is Trinity term, of course, COVID hit, so I came home and I was unable to return to Oxford. So I completed my degree from California. I was unable to access a lot of the archives I was meant to for my dissertation, so I had to kind of pivot my dissertation, but I overall completed it and was relatively happy with the result. I got a very good score on my dissertation. I got a 78, which in UK grading is supposedly really good. I graduated with a distinction, and in the master's program, you can graduate with a pass, a merit, or a distinction, if I'm correct. In order to get a distinction, you have to work really hard and you have to get over a 70. I definitely worked my butt off to get that grade. So in terms of supervision, I worked with Dr. Catherine Paw. She was my main supervisor, and I am so beyond grateful for her. She became integral to my time at Oxford for a variety of reasons, not only because she supported me and my work, but she also was my advocate to the faculty and with the university when I had to file an investigation. So I will get into the details of that in the end of this video. I just want to make sure that the people that want to know about the program at Oxford have all the information that they need to, because I'm sure that the end of this video is going to be a bit long. So overall, I had a great supervisor. There was also a wonderful supporting staff, and there are reasons I didn't stay for the PhD, which I'll touch on in a minute, but one of those was that the only person I could have worked with was Catherine, and while I love working with her, I felt like I needed to be in a PhD program where I was going to be surrounded by scholars that were doing similar work and not just working with one particular person, and that's what I found at Yale. So I'm very happy with the PhD program I'm in now. Okay, so let's talk about cost. I ended up taking on about $70,000 in debt in order to go to Oxford. For many people, that is not an option. Most people cannot take on those kinds of loans. I wish I had been able to apply for scholarships. I applied for one, but I was really late in the cycle because I decided to go to graduate school a little later than most. Overall, I do not regret taking on that debt. I am concerned about paying it off, obviously, but I have a plan. So I have a way of paying it off, but if I hadn't had that plan in place, I would not have gone and gotten my master's. I decided to go to Oxford and to go to the UK because I wanted to do a one-year master's in order to prepare me for a PhD and to increase my likelihood of getting into a top PhD program. And then on top of that, I didn't want to have to pay for 2 years of tuition at one of the top universities in the States. And that was a personal decision. I was really getting a master's in order to get into my dream PhD program, and I did. So for the people that asked me on Instagram if it was worth it, it was, but there are many things I wish I'd been able to tell myself before I went to Oxford. So now we're gonna get into the investigation and talking a little bit about that. So I'm going to preface this by saying that I have thought over this a million times. I almost didn't want to make a statement, and there was the option to go the legal route or to even go to the public press. And I ultimately decided against that because I want my life back. I want to be focusing on my PhD. I do not want this man to continue to have an impact on my work and my studies and my future. And so I'm going to make this video, and then I don't want to answer any more questions about it. I ask that you please respect my privacy and that you respect that I'm giving you this information because I want to help other students never be in this type of situation. I'm not asking for your sympathy. I'm not asking for anything. I'm telling you guys this because I don't want it to ever happen to someone else, because I want you to know how important it is to stand up for yourself and be an advocate for yourself when you think that something is wrong. So I'm not going to be giving details. I will not be saying this person's name, but I had to file a sexual harassment claim against a professor at Oxford, and I had to go through the rather grueling process of an investigation. I want to tell you guys about the steps of this investigation because it was something that no one had told me and that my professors didn't know about and that my department didn't very well know about. And it seemed to me that this is one of the first times that anybody has filed a formal complaint. It was definitely the first time it was filed against this particular professor, but it seems that the institution is known for trying to cover certain things up. So what happened was I had this uncomfortable interaction. I knew that something was wrong. I had told my family, I had told a previous mentor of mine that I was concerned. And ultimately I went to my supervisor, and I wasn't even planning on telling her what happened. I was just gonna tell her that I wanted to not have to work with this professor anymore. And she asked what was wrong, and I told her what had happened. And luckily I had a female advisor who was incredibly empathetic and who was really supportive, and she believed me and she stood up for me. And she started helping me look into what I would have to do in order to file a formal investigation. So there's a couple ways that you can file a complaint against a professor at Oxford. The two main ones being that you can file an informal complaint where the department is aware of certain behavior, but it does not actually count against that professor. It cannot actually go on their record as a way for them to have any kind of disciplinary action against them. But a lot of people will go the route of having an informal investigation because you don't have to put your name on your complaint. It can be anonymous, but if you file a formal complaint, your name has to be on the document, and you have to write a letter detailing the things that you have experienced and you have to sign it, and it goes to a formal investigator, and it begins a process within the institution. This is a grueling and time-consuming process, and I was not the only one. I was the first one to come forward, and after me there were several professors and several students that actually came forward to say that they had experienced similar things to me. And during Michaelmas term, I nearly dropped out. It was so difficult to be at an institution that I felt allowed this kind of behavior. And in addition to that, there were events that I wanted to attend. I went to Oxford because I wanted to be able to attend certain talks. I wanted to be able to network. I wanted to get to know certain academics, certain scholars, and I had to avoid going to certain events because I didn't want to run into him. And that broke my heart because I am somebody who really values my education and who values my experiences and my networking opportunities. And I felt like I had to sit certain things out because I couldn't be in a room with this man. And so I went home for winter break, and that was when the investigation was supposed to get started. And that was also the time when I was submitting PhD applications. This particular professor has connections in the United States, and I was deeply concerned that if he was to become aware of this investigation before my PhD applications were read by the doctoral committees at the schools I had applied to, that it would have an impact on my ability to go for my doctorate. Luckily, the investigation technically didn't get started until I returned during Hillary term, and that was around the time that I heard from Yale. So I'm glad that this didn't have an impact on that. Just to detail one other thing, I had the opportunity to actually be a graduate student speaker for a panel that I really wanted to be a part of. I'm somebody that if I'm granted an opportunity, I always try to seize it. And I was specifically asked by the program director if I wanted to speak at this event, and it was something I was really excited to do. And I got an email back because this professor was aware of the investigation, and he said that this professor that I was filing the investigation against was going to be on that panel, and so it was up to me, and I had to turn the opportunity down. And that made me feel so weak because I care about my work. I care about opportunities for my work. And I just felt like that wasn't fair. It wasn't fair that I had to give up that opportunity because this professor behaved inappropriately. So I got back to Oxford for Hillary term, and I just was determined that I wasn't gonna let this experience impact my ability to do my work and to do my work well. And I had a really hard time during Michaelmas term, and I wasn't going to allow my second term to be the same. So I focused on my friends, I focused on my work, I avoided that professor at all costs, and I went forward with the investigation. I went forward because I had heard so many stories of things that this professor had done to other students and things that he had said to them, and being blatantly racist and misogynistic. I couldn't be there knowing what I knew and not do something about it. And so I had to go and meet with the investigator. I had to give my testimony. It's essentially like living the experience like 3 times, because I had to live it the first time, I had to write about it in a letter, and then I had to also discuss it. And I'm just gonna tell you, no one should have to go through that. So I tell you this because there are institutional issues at Oxford and other institutions. And this investigation, the reason I filed it was not just because of him, and it wasn't just because of me. There are institutional issues within the institution of academia, not just at Oxford, that allow for this type of behavior. And so when and where we can point it out and we can make the institution aware of its flaws and say that it could do better, I feel that if we have the capacity to do so, we must. And I know that some people don't have the capacity. It is a huge emotional, laborious burden to take on this type of investigation. Believe me, I wouldn't wish it upon anybody. But if you are experiencing something, you have to do what you can to speak up. I know how lucky I am. I had a support system. I had a supervisor who stood by me. I had other professors that stood by me. I had my cohort. I had my friends. My friends were the most important part of my Oxford experience. I am so glad that I got my degree, regardless of the circumstances, COVID, the investigation, everything. But my friends, Ash, Franny, Charlie, Ellie, James, my friends were everything to me. They supported me. They were there for me. I couldn't have done it without them. And I am so thankful for them. And so the last question is, would I do it again? And my answer is yes, for 3 reasons. 1, I went to Oxford because I wanted to go on to a PhD. I wanted Oxford to act as a stepping stone, as an investment in my future. And it worked out. It worked out really, really well. I ended up at my dream school. And I was able to build up my YouTube channel around my Oxford experience, and it brought me a community that I wouldn't give up for anything. 2, I became aware of certain institutional problems that I felt would never affect me. I felt that because I was somebody who was always professional and who always maintained really good mentor relationships, that this kind of thing wouldn't happen to me, and I was wrong. It's not about me. It's not about the people that experience this type of harassment. It's about them. It's about the institution that protects them and the institution that refuses to fire them. This professor still remains on faculty, and it's not about him. I'm sure that he's been disciplined in some way. It's not about getting him fired. The important thing is that it's on his record and that he can never do it again. That if he does try to do it again, I'm sure he will be fired. The last part is that I made the most incredible friends and mentors. I had an incredible time at Somerville College. I had made the most incredible friends, as I said. I loved living in Oxford. I'm so grateful I got to live abroad for a time, and I made memories that I will never forget. And I will not let my memory of Oxford be tainted by this investigation. I will remember Oxford for the late nights with my friends, and my morning runs to get a coffee at Gale's, and my walks past the rad cam. Those are the things I will remember about Oxford. Was it worth it? Was it worth the investment? Yes. I would do it again. And I would do it again because I think that my experience was important. In addition to that, I hope that you watch this video and you watch my other videos, and that it inspires you to go into higher education if that is what you are passionate about, and to stand up for yourself and to advocate for yourself and to advocate for others, and to never let sexism and racism and other aspects of prejudice flourish in these spaces. Enough is enough. It's time for the institution to change. It's time to point out the flaws of these institutions, and it's time for them to do better. All right, we've now reached the end of the video. I hope that you guys gained some helpful information from this. If you guys have any comments or questions, please leave them down below. Again, I please ask that you respect my privacy in the matters of the investigation. I also ask that you please not ask any questions. In particular, if you are experiencing something very challenging, especially related to sexual harassment, please contact authorities, please contact the university resources. And if there's anything I can do to help you, please let me know. All right, guys, that's it for today's video. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, everyone.